Welcome to another episode of Listening in Love, hosted by Richard Ostler. My guests on today's podcast are a mother, Jill Brown, and her daughter, Esther Brown. Welcome to the podcast, you two.
Thank you for having us.
We're going to talk about their son and brother, Luke, who died by suicide January 12th, 2020, at the age of 31. And this will be a podcast. The goal of doing these podcasts are several-fold. One is to honor Luke. And we've been doing that for the last half hour before we went live. There's pictures here of Luke. There's the program from the funeral. And I just wish I'd met this good man. And so part of the podcast is to honor him, but part of the podcast is also for a sibling who has lost somebody to suicide, to talk about that road. These two siblings, while a decade apart, Esther and Luke, are friends, deeply connected, and it's been obviously, this is a family's worst nightmare that's happened. And so Esther, who reached out to me on a DM on Instagram, has been listening to podcasts of others that have come on, have talked about a suicide of a family member, and she just has some insights she'd like to share that would help other family members that have gone through this. And Jill, Luke's mom, a mother of 6, grandmother of 2, is here with us also. She spoke at the funeral, and this is a mom's worst nightmare, obviously, to have her 31-year-old son gone in January of this year, and she'll share some thoughts. But it's also, that's the first purpose, is to honor Luke, but the second purpose is to help families that are walking this road. This is a road that only other families walking this road understand. And there's some healing that can occur when you connect with and hear the stories of others walking this road. So our prayers that the things that Jill and Esther share will be helpful for you if this is part of your family journey. The third reason for this podcast is there are Lukes out there listening. Luke is someone who died by suicide, but really no one picked up that this was something he was considering and ultimately completed. And I recognize that there's a lot of people like that, that are silently considering this road. So this podcast is for you. I'm convinced that those of you that are considering this road would like to find a way to find hope and healing and a way to stay. And maybe some of the things is our prayer that Jill and Esther share will help you as you're walking a pretty difficult road and wondering if this is something that will become part of your life, which we pray it won't. Anything that I've said that needs to be corrected as far as a bio?
That's perfect.
Jill, just introduce your family for us. You've got 6 kids. Just tell us their ages and their names.
All right, I've got 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. My oldest is Kenneth. He's 34. He's an attorney. Luke would have just been 32 on the 23rd. Kelsey is 29, and she is a manager for technical writing for SkyWest. And Shelby is 24. Her husband's in college up at Rexburg. Esther just turned 19, getting her mission papers ready. And then our youngest is Mel, and he just turned 15.
And you're going to end up with a lot more than 2 grandkids someday, Jill. I don't know what your number's going to be, but it's going to be more than 2. And tell us about your 2 grandkids.
We have a little boy and little girl that are 4 and a half. They're twins. They're Ken's only children. And William and Elizabeth.
And tell us where you live.
We live in Hoytsville, which is outside of Park City. It's unincorporated Summit County.
And do you live on a lot of land, or tell us kind of, because my impression is I'm in the city on a 1/3 of an acre. I'm guessing you have more land than that.
Yeah, we have 250 acres up on above Hoytsville. Our nearest neighbors are cows. My brother-in-law's cows. We don't have any cows. We try to keep 2 dogs alive. And we live around my husband's family. My husband was raised there. So all my children have graduated from North Summit High School.
North Summit High School. Well, we should be doing, this is a July afternoon, listeners. And we're in the city. We should be up in your yard doing this podcast on this beautiful afternoon with puffy clouds over those mountains and green fields.
And cool.
And cooler, exactly. Yes. Thanks again for both of you being on the podcast. Let's Esther, kind of talk to our listeners why you reached out and wanted to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
Or actually, you just reached out saying a couple of these podcasts were helpful, and I say, would you be willing to share your story? And you said, sure.
Yeah, I love your podcasts. I first discovered you on Twitter. I just saw that you were following the same people that I was following, so I just decided to follow you. And I really liked your tweets. And, you know, I myself am an LGBTQ ally, and that's very important to me. And I really like that we have the same beliefs on that. And I just loved how you included everyone. And you really made me see the gospel in a new light and have strengthened my testimony in that way. And then when my brother passed away, I was going through a really rough time, as I'm sure anyone who's gone down this road, they know how I feel. And I was on Facebook, and I don't know how I found it, but I found Leanne. Like, I saw Listen, Learn, and Love by Richard Ostler, and I was like, I know that name somehow. And I just saw that someone had posted that Leanne was on it, and I know Leanne's story, and so I started to listen, and that helped me so much, just with what I was going through. And after I got done listening to that, I sent the link to my mom and my sisters, and they listened too. And yeah, it just helped me, and not only that episode, but all the other episodes I listened to after that so much. And so I just wanted to let you know that it helped me, so I decided to reach out.
Glad you reached out. I'm glad Leanne is one of my heroes, just like your family, for bravely being willing to talk about what's gone in her family. And if our listeners aren't familiar, that's Leanne Tressler. Although I think she's getting married. I think I picked up on Facebook. You're both nodding your heads. So she lost a husband and then her oldest son to suicide. And was willing to talk about that and really admire her. Her podcast maybe has 20, 30,000 listens. So these kind of podcasts are pretty tender, but often very helpful to other people. Jill, you spoke at the funeral. I got the funeral program in front of me. This is right before COVID kind of broke out. So will you just share with our listeners a little bit about your talk at his funeral? Or just introduce our listeners to Luke.
The reason I really wanted to speak at his funeral, even though my oldest son and my husband were not in favor of it, was because I could tell the story of Luke. When Luke was born, I always said Luke didn't act like he ever wanted to be here, because his birth was very traumatic, and we both ended up in ICU. And the heavens opened when Luke was born. And I really wanted to tell that story. However, as I sat down to write my talk the night before, that wasn't the story I told. The story I told was about having a testimony of Christ, so that in your despair, you have someone. And I didn't feel like Luke had that. And so that was what I wanted to convey, because I think in that audience, as I met people at the viewing, it was very tough to meet some people I never met. And as I looked out on that audience, I think there was a lot of Lukes in that audience. And I wanted them to know that even at my darkest hour, I could rely on Christ, and I had him. And so I don't know if I made any sense that day, but that was what I was trying to convey, was that. And so hopefully that made sense to somebody out there. And I think it did, because in the days and the months after or weeks after, there was a lot of people that said that they had to go back to that feeling, that knowing that Christ was there for them. So maybe it did.
I love that. Any thoughts, Esther, on your mom's talk? Luke's, and do you remember it, and any things you want to share about that?
Yes, I do. I was so proud of my mom for speaking. That is a day that I would not ever want to repeat. And, you know, the things that me and my family went through that week and, you know, are still going through, I would not wish it on my worst enemy. And my mom is the most wonderful lady. My mom loves her kids. I'm sorry. And she's just a wonderful mother. And her and Luke had a very special bond. And I remember the night before the funeral, I went downstairs to say goodnight to my mom, and I saw her writing that talk. And I'm sorry, I'm losing my trail of thought, but when I saw her stand up, although it was very hard, my mom looked like an angel to me. And she has gone through a rough couple of years after my grandpa passed away. And, you know, because her and my grandpa were very close. And, you know, Luke kind of saw that she struggled with that and struggled with coping. And so I'm sure that day when she had that strength to stand up and talk at his funeral after all she had been through with losing my grandpa and Luke, I'm sure Luke was just so proud. And her talk was so beautiful because it's true. When you're in your darkest moments, this is something I have learned as I've gotten older, is that no matter how heavy you feel or how hard life seems to get, Christ is always there. Christ suffered on the cross for all of us. And I truly believe that Christ knows us, and he knows how Luke felt, and he suffered with Luke. And when Luke crossed the veil, he was there to welcome Luke with his open arms. And it was so wonderful to see my mom stand up and speak about that, how Christ is with us through everything, and all we have to do is just go to him. And I just thought that was really beautiful.
I love that you chose to talk about that as part of your talk, and I think I really agree with what you taught, Jill, is that Christ is there for all of us. And I think sometimes we believe he's not there when we're not our best or doing our best, or we sometimes think we're not worthy of his love or his acceptance or his help in our lives. And I think that's just not consistent with our doctrine. I'm so glad you taught that. Sometimes people think, well, I'll kind of get back to where I need to be, however that's defined by someone, and then I'll be worthy of Christ's help, and then I can connect with. I think all of us are parents, and we'll meet our kids where they are, and we just want to walk with them. So, you know, I'd love to talk more about Luke. You know, you've got these pictures here on the table. This is a beautiful young man who is given with full of life and goodness. Why don't you go first, Esther? Let's talk about your brother.
Yeah, of course. Luke was an awesome guy. I mean, there are so many words to describe Luke. He was just a wonderful big brother. Me and him are 13 years apart, and my 4 older siblings, so Kenny, Luke, Kelsey, and Shelby. They're my half siblings. But from the moment I was born, I have always been accepted. I said this, I sang at his funeral, but before I sang, I spoke a little bit. And I said, we may, this is kind of a cheesy statement, but it's 100% true. We may be half siblings, but there was no like half love. They from the moment I was born, they accepted me. And Luke was wonderful at that. I mean, all my siblings are, but Luke was absolutely wonderful at that. From the moment I was little, we were pals. I remember him coming home from high school, and he would just pick me up and be like, "Okay, Ellie, let's go downstairs." So I'd be like, "Okay," and he would play video games, and I would just sit on the floor and, watch him. And he, although I know nothing about video games, I would like see a character like a princess in like a pretty dress or something, and be like, "Oh, can I be her?" And he'd be like, "Yeah." And so he'd kind of keep playing his game, but he'd like somehow incorporate me into the story. And he did that all the time. And I remember he introduced me to who the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were. He showed me all these different movies. And I have like this distinct memory of watching The Hunchback of Notre Dame with him. And that movie's kind of scary when you're little, because you have no idea what's going on. And but he was just awesome. I don't know. He was just awesome. And he introduced me to all these different movies. He introduced me to my sense of humor. All me and my siblings are funny in our own right, but he's kind of the reason I have the sense of humor I have. Like we're all very dry. We like weird memes and stuff, and that's kind of because of Luke, because he has like the funniest sense of humor. If you ask anyone to describe Luke, they'd probably say hilarious, because he was so funny. He was very personable. He was an introvert, but if you got him talking and stuff, he wants to know everything about you. And he was very creative. He loved movies and video games. And after he passed away, we got some notebooks, and like we saw how he created all these different kinds of stories, and how he had all these different like video game ideas, and like who does that? Like, but he did. He loved it, and he loved puzzles, which I'll never understand because I am not a puzzle person. But he loved puzzles. He loved putting things together. He loved learning new things. And one thing that he really liked was Jeopardy. As he got older, him and his roommate started watching Jeopardy, and he just like became obsessed with it. He came up with a song to like the tune of the Jeopardy theme song, and he loved Alex Trebek. And yeah, he was just there's so much to say about Luke, but he was just all around awesome, funny, creative person, just a wonderful person.
I'd love to have Jill comment some more on Luke. It's interesting to me that there's roughly 13 years between you and Luke. And in my experience, that's a big enough gap that siblings often don't connect. That Luke is in his teens when you're, in your single digits, and he's in his 20s. And so it's a credit to Luke and you that you have this beautiful friendship. You showed me a picture before we started that our listeners can't see. It's your newborn picture, your 1-year-old picture. And this young man in his teens, I guess, early teens, just bright-eyed and full of life. And it just gave me an insight into this beautiful connection between the two of you and how unique your relationship, and I use the present term, is, because I think it continues. And it's a credit for you, Jill. Since these are stepbrothers, the inference is there you've gone through a divorce, and you're married now and have had 4 kids with your first husband and 2 with your next husband. But that's a credit to you that, that's probably not what you thought would be part of your path. That would happen, and that it's a credit to you that you brought this family together. There may have been some hard days and some days when they didn't all get along. That's certainly true of our family. But it's a credit to you for what you've done with these siblings and all your children's to bring them together under your love. There's something about a mother's heart and ability to bring a family together. And that's why I love you spoke at Luke's funeral. Tell us some more about Luke. Tell us some of his interests or just anything else you'd like to share.
Well, first, going back to that, my husband gets a lot of credit too because when
What was his first name?
his name's Mel Brown.
Mel.
Yeah.
Way to go, Mel, if you're listening.
Our 15-year-old is Melvin R. Brown II.
Way to go. Way to keep that name going.
Yep. But it's a credit to him because when he asked me to marry him, I said, I do not want my children treated as stepchildren. So if you're going to refer to my kids as stepchildren, I'm not going to get married. And he said, no, they will be my children. And he paid for college, he paid for cars, he went to every basketball game and every dance recital. I mean, he's been a good dad. So I can't get all the credit.
That's great.
But yeah, he's been a good man. But Luke, back to Luke, Luke was such a compassionate child. I mean, when he was on the trek, him and Kelsey were on the trek when Mel was born, and he was so excited to get home and hold that baby. And we got home from the hospital not very long before Luke was to get there, and he came running in the house and dropped everything and looked terrible because he hadn't showered in 4 days, and grabbed that little boy and just sat and held him. So Luke was such a compassionate with animals, and he cared. It was an interesting thing because, like, when my dad was sick, he went to stay with him. But then after my dad passed away, then my husband got really sick, and he got an infection and had to be hospitalized for quite a bit in April and again in December of 2017. And I hated to leave the hospital. I hated to, because I just knew, I thought, this is just such a bad joke that I'm going to lose my father, who I worshiped, the ground he walked on, and then my husband. And so Luke would come to the hospital, and he would say to me, oh, Mom, go home and shower and go home and sleep. And I'm like, I don't want to leave. And he said, I'll call you, and I'll let you know. But I was an hour away from the hospital, and Luke would sleep there all night. He would sit in his chair and read a book and wait in case my husband needed anything, because he needed care. He couldn't even get out of bed on his own at that point. So Luke is a compassionate, loving person. I mean, he hated conflict, but you could always count on him,
Talk about, before we visited it, I love that last segment, Joe. We talked about your father, Ken, who died of pancreatic cancer. Talk about Luke's role in Ken's life once that diagnosis happened.
Well, you probably have to go back to when Luke and Ken and Kelsey were little, because they were so close to my father. And he, when Luke was born, my dad and mom had divorced. And so Luke and Ken were, they were as much to him as he was to them. I mean, they just had such a strong bond. And so when my dad was taken to Provo Medical Center, and he was we didn't know at the time, but we felt it was bad. And my oldest 3 children came down when they told us that he had pancreatic cancer. And I remember sitting in that emergency room. Actually, I don't think we're in the emergency room, but anyway, we were sitting there, and I just remember the devastation of all of us. And I had to, Esther was swimming, so I had to leave. And when I left, it was kind of we were trying to decide what to do, and my dad wanted to go home to Richfield. And so I left the hospital, went to watch Esther swim, and I called back to talk to my daughter, Kelsey, to see what, if my dad had left and what was happening. And she told me that Luke had gone to take a test because he was enrolled at Salt Lake Community College. And he had quit his job, and he was headed to Richfield to stay with my dad for as long as it took. And we knew it wasn't going to be long because of being in pancreatic cancer. It was stage 4. And he just moved to Richfield from Salt Lake and sat next to my dad and laughed and did puzzles. And while my dad slept, he would just sit there quietly. And that was just the kind of kid he was.
You know, I'm assuming Luke is 21, 22, 23, during this time, or maybe older. If he's probably older because your dad died about 3 or 4 years ago.
He was like 29 or 30.
So he's still old. But that's the time, at least in my life, I was pretty selfish during that time. I kind of had my life planned, and I just admire it. Just think gives me and our listeners an insight into Luke, and the fact he could just flip on a dime and realize what was the most important thing, and just go to Richfield and be with his grandpa, your father, Ken. And I love what he did. He was just there, and it wasn't very complicated. And he's just playing puzzles and talking and just there. And I have to think about their relationship on the other side of the veil. Do you go there sometimes, and or have you had feelings about these are the two most important people in your life that are on the other side of the veil? There's a lot of people in your life that are important in your life that are here, but I'm guessing the two most important people to you that are gone are your husband, Ken, and Luke.
Yeah. Well, I was actually at his birthday the other day. I was thinking, I'm a cyclist. I ride my bike many miles a week, and I'll sit or I'll be riding and I'll think just something, and I'll just think my dad and Lukey are somewhere close, just barrel laughing, because Ken and my dad and Luke had a special language. They would laugh, and you would be like, I do not know what is funny, but they would just laugh. And so I think probably they are barrel laughing over some funny things, and they're probably crying at others. But yeah, they had such a strong connection, those two. I know my dad was there in Luke's final hours. I know he had to be.
Love that. I believe that. Esther, any thoughts that come to you about Luke and your grandpa, or just more thoughts about Luke?
Oh, well, it's true. Luke and my grandpa, Grampy, that's what we called him, had a very special connection. There's a story. So when I was just beginning high school, so I was probably 14. Luke asked me if I would go to Richfield with him to visit our grandpa. And I was like, yeah, of course. And so, we packed up and went down to Richfield. And my grandpa was a hard worker, and he accomplished so much. He was a lawyer, and he was a coal miner when he was, and he did all these things, and even when he was mid-70s, he still stayed busy, which I would never understand. When I'm 70, I'm gonna be chilling. And so anyway, so he had a farm, and he had bees, and the bees were usually in his backyard, but someone was spraying pesticide in the field next to his house, so he had to move the bees across town. And at this point, I was reading Harry Potter, and I was pretty engulfed in Harry Potter. And so I remember I was just laying on the couch, and my grandpa was like, hey sis, do you want to come with me to, see my bees? And I was like, oh, I'm okay. I also am afraid of bees. And so I was like, I think I'll just stay back. But Luke and our cousin went with our grandpa across town. And it was probably an hour and a half later, and they come in, and Luke just looks like not good. And he's covered in bee stings. I'm like, oh my gosh, Luke, what happened? Yeah, bee stings. And I'm like, Luke, what happened? And Luke was really good at telling, a story, and he was so funny. And he was like, well, I went over with the bees, and they had a van, and like the van like closed, like the door like closed like automatically, so you press a button and it would close. And he was like, I was just standing there with the bees, and me and Mackenzie were standing there, and all of a sudden the bees just started attacking us and swarming us. And so him and Mackenzie like bolted it to the van, and they the bees followed them into the van and were stinging them. Yeah, and they kept stinging them. And while he was just like screaming like trying to like close the door, but it was automatic, and so it was so slow, and so they were just getting stung by bees. Well, my grandpa, who was like the toughest man I'd ever met, he like the bees would sting him and he'd just swat them off. Like he got stung by like probably like 10 bees that day, but he acted like it was nothing. And so I just remember that, and that was just so funny to me. And that was just the person he was. Luke was just very like giving and hilarious and great at telling stories. And I really, looking back, I appreciate those moments I had with them. Like as a 15-year-old, that seems like kind of like a small thing. Going to stay with your, grandpa. Like I'm sure I wanted to do other things, but I just love being around Luke, and I have so many more stories I could tell with them, but looking back, I just appreciate those moments.
What song did you sing at the funeral?
I sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow because he loved The Wizard of Oz, and so I thought about other songs to sing, but I ultimately picked that one just because that was his favorite movie, and I just thought it would be a good tribute, and I like the words in that song.
Love that. Just touched by both of your remarks so far. The beautiful family you have. Do either of you want to talk about just what it's like to be a mother or a sister of someone who dies by suicide and how painful that is? Is there any vocabulary you can use, or how do you describe that to other people? Anybody want to talk about this just road that you're walking? It's just the worst road I can imagine a parent or a sibling walk.
The thing is people will ask you, and it's so hard to put into words. There's such a void. There's no family holiday. There's no birthday. Nothing's complete anymore. There's such an emptiness without him. Even if he just came and sat and read a book, at least he was there and we got to see him, And the not knowing, not even suspecting, and the shock. I don't know how long it takes for the shock to wear off. I don't think it ever does. It's just an emptiness that will never be filled.
It's the first thing that you think about when you wake up. Like, I'll wake up thinking it's going to be an awesome, bright day. It could be just any day. It happens every day. And I'll think, Luke's gone. And it's just the most surreal thing. And sometimes it doesn't feel real. Like, I still text his phone sometimes just to see if he'll respond.
I like that.
Yeah. Or I'll see a meme. In fact, a few days after he passed away, I was sitting in my apartment, and this old cartoon that we used to watch came up on my Instagram. I don't know how. It was turned into a meme form, and I was like, oh my gosh, Luke would love this. And then I remembered, Luke can't see that, or I won't be able to send that to him because no one's going to pick up the phone. So it's very surreal, and my emotions change. Sometimes I said this in a post I posted a few days ago, sometimes I'm, broken and I cry, and sometimes I'm just stoic because it's just kind of how my body processes it. It's just, I don't know, it's so much that my body kind of sets it aside, like it's so much trauma that I have to deal with that, it's always background noise, but sometimes it hits like really hard, or sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, Luke's gone, and yeah, it's just crazy.
I love the word you use, Jill Void. And I guess I want everything to be all better for your family and everything back to normal, but I think when you talk like that, I realize that's never going to happen. And maybe that's just the reality, and you're accepting that our family's never going to be the same. And this void of having Luke gone will last your whole lifetime. And your kids' lifetime who grew up with Luke. And I hope that there'll be happy days and you feel like a family again, but I recognize it'll never be the same. I shouldn't expect or hope. I think it would dismiss how difficult the road is if I just kind of want everything to be okay again.
I think a lot of people want it to be okay. I think a lot of people in your life, they don't understand. They haven't lost a child, and they want it to be okay. But you never go back. When my dad died, I had come to accept the fact that he was going to die. But you never plan on burying your child. You don't prepare for that. And so when it happens, there's nothing to fill that person. There's nothing to replace Luke. Just like my other 5 children, no one will ever replace each individual child that I have. And I think that's probably the hardest thing for other people to accept, because they don't understand. And you find yourself isolating yourself because people don't understand. And I think that my kids, especially my daughter, Kelsey, I think that's how she feels. People think you're going to get up one day and you're going to feel better, but you're not. You don't feel better. And I think that's why, I think it's so important to realize that your life matters. I mean, no matter what life you have, your life matters. And the part that Luke played in our life was it's like a puzzle. It's like a missing puzzle. That puzzle is never going to be completed, ever. And we can search and search and search for that piece, but it's never coming back. So that's a sad reality.
Thanks for being so honest, Julie. 2 questions come to my mind. If I'm your friend or a neighbor or a board member, is there questions I should ask you, shouldn't ask you? What can I do to help you? And maybe Esther wants to answer that too. Either of you could answer that.
I mean, I can answer to the fact that I know that you pull away and you isolate yourself because people say things they don't really mean to say, and you're like, they don't understand how painful it is. Sometimes you just want a friend that will just walk with you, and sometimes you don't want them to say anything, but I do find myself isolating myself a lot from people because what some people have thought was something good wasn't really good. It didn't help me. So I don't know if I had to go to somebody in my situation. I think the only thing you can do is say, I'm sorry, and people will say to you, if you call me or if you need me, call me. No one's going to call you. I mean, you're not going to call people. You're not going to call people. I think that's why, your podcast with Leanne Tressler was so moving to me because I could relate to what she was saying and I knew how she felt. And if you don't feel it, you can't relate. And so it's no one's fault. I mean, Esther probably can say something that's a lot more profound than me.
It's pretty profound, Jill.
I just remember after Luke died, I was home because my friend was in a play and I wanted to come up and see him in the play. And right after I found out, I had driven my friend home, my roommate home. She grew up in the same town as me, so we both went and saw the play, and I drove. So she was needing a ride back to school, and I remember after Luke passed away, I called her and I said, Peyton, I said, my brother just passed away. I don't know what I'm going to do, and all this stuff. And I didn't even really want to go back to school, but my parents encouraged me to, which I'm glad they did because I was glad to be in Ephraim where I went to school. Just, to have some time to work it all out, like a few days to work it out with my professors and everything. And, I told Peyton, I was like, Peyton, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she said, okay, well, I will drive. She's like, just bring your car over and I will drive. And, not a lot of words were spoken during that drive, but I knew that she was there and she was there. She's amazing. Her and all my other roommates, so many people have helped me through this. They were amazing. And Peyton has never gone through what I have gone through. And I hope she never does. But she was there. Like, she didn't know what to say. And a lot of people didn't know what to say. And that's kind of like the best thing you can do is like admit, be like, I don't know what you're experiencing. I've never been through what you've been through, but I will be there for you. And so just saying that and just, saying I'm sorry is the best thing you can do. So many people have helped me. I already said that, but, just being there, like, you don't even have to say anything. If it makes you uncomfortable, then that's okay. Like, because this is an uncomfortable situation. It's a really hard situation. But just being there and being a friend is just amazing. And I owe so much to so many people. But just being there.
I love that because I can do that. I can drive in a car with you and just listen or not say anything. I don't need any special training to do that. And sometimes I recognize that for men in particular, maybe all of us in general, it's hard sometimes just to be quiet and listen. I often know when I hear of someone that's died by suicide, I want to know how. And I want to know kind of the backstory. And I've learned I've tried to get my mind out of that space and try to learn about the person and just honor that person by pretending to be at their funeral and hearing their family talk about, just like we've been doing in this podcast. So, because I find there's a curiosity in my mind that would love to know, how somebody died by suicide. What was the means? And did somebody find him? And just sort of all this morbid stuff that only me asking you those questions generally adds to your load and re-traumatizes you. Or questions like, did you know? Or who found him? And that's sort of, I've learned to try to mute that part of my brain because it just adds to your burden. This isn't a time for me, my curiosity or being the latest one to know the inside scoop of what really happened so I can tell everybody and kind of elevate myself because I'm in the know. It's my time to mourn with you and getting to know Luke and asking how you're doing is better than some of the things I might have done earlier. And so and I've learned not to say simple platitudes like, this will all work out in the next life, or he's going to bless you on their side, or isn't it wonderful he's with Ken, your father? And I recognize that makes me emotionally safe, and I can kind of think, well, this is all okay now. But that's just for me. I recognize that this isn't about me if I'm trying to help you when you've lost your son. And I've got to do the things you're inviting our listeners to do if I'm really going to lift your burden versus add to your burden. Any more thoughts on any of that?
Well, I realize, during the funeral, I'll be honest, a lot of people said some things that, like you said, they kind of brought up emotions I didn't want to feel. But I realize, when people are uncomfortable or when people just don't know what to say, they kind of just ramble, which...
It's very insightful.
Yeah, which, I'll be honest, I do that all the time, when I don't know what to say, I kind of just say what's off the top of my head, and I don't think about it. And so when a lot of people did ask me, well, did you know? I'm like, well, obviously, if I would have known, we wouldn't be in this situation, But I realize, they're not saying that to be mean. They're not giving me, these empty words to be mean. They're just trying to come up with something to say because they don't know what else to say, they've never experienced this. They don't know how I'm feeling, but they're trying. And so that's just something that I learned. I actually, one of my sister's friends, her brother passed away, not by suicide, but just another means. And she said, a lot of people are going to say some dumb things to you this week. And it's not because they're trying to be rude. It's just because they're trying to understand in the best way they can, and they're trying to help in the best way they can. And so they'll say these things, but they don't mean them, And like I said earlier, the best thing you can do for someone who has gone through what me and my family, or what other people I know have gone through, is just be there. Just say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. I don't know exactly what you're feeling, but I will be there for you. And service speaks louder than words. I can't remember a lot of the things people said, but I do remember the things people did. Giving me or my mom a hug, or
Sending food.
Yeah,
to my starving family.
Yeah, sending food, or just saying good memories of Luke. I love that. This one girl I know, she sent me old home videos that she had of Luke.
Cool.
That has helped me so much, and it's something I can look back on and that I can go back to and be like, oh, Luke was just such an awesome guy. He was so great, and my brain is starting to, go fuzzy of memories, because that's just what brains do. But that keeps his memory alive, and it keeps me remembering Luke was my amazing older brother.
That's a good segment. Jill, you kind of talked to others that, from what I think maybe our listeners are gathering, what we've talked about before we went live is this was a complete surprise. So this wasn't a bunch of yellow flags that led to Luke dying by suicide. This was a complete shock and a complete surprise. And I guess that's probably true of somebody that dies this way. But both of you, I'm sure there's guilt. I don't want to re-guilt you, re-traumatize you. There's sort of why didn't I pick up signs? And I don't want you to, because everybody would go back and naturally think, well, I wish I'd done something different. So don't do that. But talk to other Lukes out there that are listening, that are keeping this all inside. And even though they know people love them, they've got, parents that love them, siblings that love them, they're not talking to anybody about this. And their personality, sounds like Luke's personality, being an introvert and being incredibly empathetic of other people, he kind of kept all this to himself. And even when he opened up, I think he talked about how he didn't quite open up, even in really safe places like a mom and a sister, which would be, I just sense he loved you both. But just talk to Lukes out there that are keeping this all inside. And are really suicidal, what would you say to them?
The thing that I wish that I could say to Luke is, like I said, no one is going to fill your void. No one. And everyone has a Luke. But if you don't talk or you don't reach out, we don't know. We have no idea. And we live a life of what ifs, you know? If I had known, I would have never left his side. I would have got him every help. I mean, I know that there's people that live in darkness, and we don't understand it if we don't have depression. And I have an extreme sadness because of Luke, but I could never say that I knew depression, you know. Losing my dad was devastating, and I have a cloud of sadness, but I never gave up hope. And if you have that feeling of hopelessness, you have to find somebody that can help you. We need you. No one is going to fill your life. No one is going to replace you. And so for you to suffer like that alone, everybody wants to help you. There's not a mother in this world that wants her child to go through that. There's not a sibling in the world that wants their sibling to go through that. But I don't know how to stop it if you don't know, if you have no idea. I mean, that's why I've tried to think of how to honor Luke's life. I don't want Luke to be forgotten. But he never called a suicide helpline. He never reached out to a counselor. He was scared to death to be addicted to anything. He wouldn't take any kind of antidepressant. So how do you know unless you will say? So I'm just begging anybody that is in a dark place. Just a simple, please help me. That's all you'd have to say. I would have gone at any time in the night or day if I just would have known.
Yeah, exactly. I've learned through this process to rely on friends and family. And I've realized that's what they're there for, you know, your friends are there to listen. Your friends and family, they care about you. It's uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable leaning on people, but you have to realize that's why they're there. Your family does not want you to feel this way. Your friends, they do not want you to feel how you are feeling if you are feeling the way Luke felt. And I wish more than anything, Luke would have just said to me, Ellie, or they called me Ellie, I'm depressed. I'm feeling down. These demons are kicking at me and they're winning and I need help. I would have done anything, like my mom said, to get him help. And I would have said, okay, Luke, I will help you. I keep losing my train of thought. I'm sorry.
You're doing great, Esther. I love what you said, that I've learned to rely on other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a sign of strength. I think sometimes we have this phrase in the church that I like. It says, work out your own salvation, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes we culturally sort of say this, anything going on in my life, it's sort of my job to figure it out. And what you said to me was a higher sort of law, a higher way of living is we need each other. And we need to learn to rely on each other. And that's not a sign of weakness. That's not a sign of, it's just a sign that that's how we're wired. We're wired for connection. That's why we're in these families and have friends and a church community, is we need each other. And we need to learn to be honest, just like you're suggesting, Jill, with what's really going on in our lives. And that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength. just like you said, to be able to open up with how you're feeling.
Exactly. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all going through this mortal life, you know, and we need to learn to rely on each other and to lean on our Savior, because that's why they're there. After Luke passed away, I immediately got help, because I knew I could not do this by myself. If I did this by myself, I wouldn't be in a good space. And so I immediately went to a counselor.
Cool.
And I received the help I needed. And my friends told me, they're like, please tell me what you need. And like I said, I had a great friend like Peyton who drove me home. I had another great friend who, you know, I needed to get anger out, because, you know, grief is a crazy thing, and I was feeling a lot of anger. And so we went and smashed eggs, which sounds pretty unconventional, but hey, it helped. And so, I if you are feeling like Luke, and if you're feeling like me, if you're going through grief, please tell someone. If you keep it inside, it's just going to boil over, and you need to get it out. And please rely on someone. You matter to someone. I love this quote. My favorite movie is Moulin Rouge. And there's a song called Elephant Love Medley, and you know, it's a romance song, but one of my favorite lyrics is how wonderful, sorry, I was like singing it, I'm like, am I saying it right? How wonderful life is while you're in the world. And I think that's also an Ellen John song, but I think that's so powerful, because you are so wonderful, you matter to so many people, and to someone, you make their world wonderful. Luke made my life so wonderful, and so many other people do. And you just have to realize that you are so important, and you matter to so many people.
It's a really good segment. Somebody framed it up to me when I told them who was a suicidal person. I said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and he or she, I can't remember, looked at me and says, there's no light in my tunnel. And it helped me understand the difficult spot. And so then I thought, what do you say to somebody? And I think you say what you two said. And you just have hope that if you stay in your body, to use Galen Condi's term, is stay in your body for one more day, that there is, I think your older self will look back at some point and be so glad you stayed, even though it feels so hopeless right now. So I just join with Jill and Esther and invite those of you that just feel like you can't stay any longer, just to stay another day, and let people, just like Jill's invitation, let people know how you're really feeling. That's a part of getting help and getting healthy. You're not meant to solve everything on your own. We need each other, and it's not a sign of weakness to say, I need help. I want to talk about why you're deciding to serve a mission, maybe in the last segment, but I want to talk about this foundation that you put together to Luke. One of you just go ahead and introduce that for us and how you decided to do that.
Ever since Luke died, I have thought, how am I going to keep people to not forget him? And so my siblings, my brother and my sisters, and my nieces and nephews and my kids, we just kind of brainstormed what we could do. And we decided that we could start a foundation and award scholarships to people that we think are, have the same qualities of Luke. If we could help Luke, we would, but we can't. So can we help? Who else can we help? And we were brainstorming, and we came up with, it's the Lucas Terrell Kitchen Foundation, which is his full name, but our events are called Live for Your Luke, because, and that was my nephew, Spencer, and my niece, Annika, that came up with that. And it's because everyone, whether you know it or not, you have a Luke in your life. And so through this foundation, we'll keep Luke's memory alive. But hopefully we can help your Luke, the Luke in your life. And that's what our goal is.
And if you are a Luke, we can help you.
Yes. And if you're a Luke, we want to help you, for sure.
I love that. I love that the whole family came together and jointly did this together and started this foundation. That's going to help a lot of people. Tell us why you decided to start a mission. Tell us a little more about that, Esther, and just any story you want to share. Just as this brought you closer with God when Luke passed away, closer with our church, further. Did it get complicated, or has it always been pretty easy? Anything you want to share as part of your faith journey, just navigating all this, and now your decision to serve a mission?
Thank you. So last year, before Luke passed away, I was working and I had just graduated high school, and I was going through a spiritually hard time. Yeah, I just didn't know how I felt about the church. I always knew that there was a God and that, Jesus Christ is my Savior, but I didn't feel their love, and I wasn't really focusing so much on, my spirituality. I was, focusing more on worldly things, and, my spirituality just wasn't really a priority. And then I went to church, and there was a fast and testimony meeting, and this girl, she shared, her testimony about how she needed an answer to a question, and so she went to the temple, and she got the answer to her question, and I was like, okay, I wonder if she's going on a mission. And so Casey, that's her name, I messaged her, and I was like, hey, Casey, this is random, but, what, I was just wondering, are you going on a mission? And she messaged me back, and she was like, no, I'm not going on a mission, but I am going on a service mission, and all this stuff. And, that was really just all I was wondering, if she was going on a mission. And so I was like, okay, that's great. And I was just going to end the conversation there. But I got the prompting to ask her for help. And so I reached out to her and said, Casey, I'm going through a hard time spiritually, and I just want to, I need someone to talk to. And she was like, okay. She was like, we can meet up and have dinner tonight. And I was like, okay. And so we met up, and we went to Denny's. That's not important, but I love Denny's. And she did help me through it. She told me, she was like, God knows you, and God answers your prayers. And, she told me, she's like, I don't know exactly what you're struggling with, but you can always rely on him. And I was like, okay, that's great, And I went home, and I was just laying in bed, and I was just on Instagram. It was the most insignificant thing. And I got this most overwhelming sensation in my body, and this the words got burnt in my brain, go on a mission. And it was so powerful, and I was like, oh my God. At this point, I did not want to go on a mission. I hadn't even thought about that. And I texted my friend Peyton, who was also my roommate. I said, Peyton, I just got the prompting that I need to go on a mission, but I don't want to go, Peyton. And Peyton's so supportive. She's such a sweetheart. And she was like, well, she's very reassuring. She's like, okay, maybe it's not a full-time mission. Maybe it's just a couples mission or a service mission. And I was like, yeah, maybe. And so I called my sister Shelby, and I said, Shelby, I just got the prompting to go on a mission. And Shelby said, oh, I know. And I was like, what do you mean you know? She's like, Ilya, I think you would be an amazing missionary. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And she was like, well, just pray about it and think about it. And for a few months after that, I still did not want to go on a mission. It was just not something I had in mind. I thought I was going to marry, someone young, but then I went to college, and I was like, actually, no, I don't want to marry anyone. But, I was like, I came to know my Savior more, and I started to rely on my Savior more. And after Luke passed away, for the weeks after that, I was like, should I go on a mission, or does my family need me right now? And what I've decided is that if there's someone like Luke out there that's waiting for me and while I'm on my mission, and someone that needs to hear, that God loves them and, my message, then I will give my 18 months just to meet that person. I want to help. I want to help a Luke. And I did tell Luke that I was thinking about going on a mission before he passed away, and Luke wasn't very serious. He was like, "Oh, that's cool," and just said stuff like that, but he was very supportive of it and everything. And I had a dream that he visited me, and he said, and it was right after he passed away, and when I was going through a really spiritually hard time, and I was angry, and Luke said, and I was thinking about not going on a mission. Luke told me in my dream, which is so not like Luke, because he was a very, silly person, but in this dream, he said, "Ellie, Satan is going to try and tempt you and distract you, but you can't listen." And then he hugged me and he said goodbye. And I really think that I do need to go on a mission and stay true to God, so I can help someone like Luke. And I'll be honest, I'm scared. I'm scared, and COVID is a thing that's happening right now, and I worry, and sometimes I don't do the right things, but I really do believe in the gospel, and something I believe more than anything is the eternal families. I know that I'm going to see Luke again someday, and I need to let people know that there is a Savior who loves them, and that they can be, if they have lost someone the way that I have lost Luke, they will see them again. And I just have a testimony that God knows us. God knows you. If you are feeling demons creep up on you and tell you that you are nothing, or that you are important, that is not true. God loves you. God knows you. Jesus Christ died for you. No matter how you feel, he knows how you felt. He has been with you through every step of the way. And I truly believe that I'm going to see Luke again, and that Luke is in total peace right now. I don't worry about Luke. He's chilling. He's having a great time up there. Although I wish he was still down here with me, I know that he knows now that he is so loved and that he was never abandoned. And yeah, I just want people to know that.
That's a great segment, Esther. I'm struck with a couple things about that. I'm struck with the reason you want to go to mission is completely focused on other people. And maybe it isn't every moment of your life, but I just love the mature spiritual spot in where you want to serve a mission because you want to bring other people to Christ, and you want to find Lukes out there that don't have any hope in their life. What a great reason to serve a mission. What a great reason to bring people the gospel. And what a great way to honor Luke. Then I wondered if you, and maybe you've thought about this, I sort of imagined your missionary badge. Mm-hmm. And on the other side that no one can see, you honoring Luke somehow with a sticker or his name or a Wizard of Oz or something that would just make Luke kind of on that badge symbolically serving with you, as he will be with you, just like you know. And I just love the hope you can bring to others that you're doing in this podcast, and you could do on this mission. Assuming you end up serving with it, sounds like you're pretty committed, but you will be a great missionary. And you will reach people that no one else can reach, and somehow they'll just get it. You'll just get their story, and you'll be able to identify. And they may not have a situation exactly like a family member, but you just have gifts that you have right now that will just make you relate to other people and be able to walk on sister roads because of the road you're walking on, and your companions and others will go, she just gets it. And that's part of your beautiful life mission, but there's still this huge void that looks gone. So that doesn't replace that, but it's just, I really admire your maturity and your desire to serve, and you will be a great missionary.
Thank you so much.
We're coming at the end. You've done a great job. Are there things more that either of you would like to say?
Just that you're loved, and you are so important to so many people. And if you don't think you can tell a family member or a friend, please call, the National Suicide Hotline. Please message me. Like, I have Instagram, I have Snapchat. Please message me. My Instagram is queen.esther.brown, and I would love to talk to you and give you the help you need. But just know that if there's someone you don't think you can go to, you can. If you don't feel comfortable, you'd be surprised on how much people want to help and how good people are. So please, and just know that your Savior, Jesus Christ, loves and cares about you so much.
Jill, any other thoughts you'd like to share?
That was what I was going to close with by saying, if you are in a position, pray. Pray. If that's the only thing you can do, because Christ will walk with you. You might not know it, but I know He's walked with me. So it's not profound, but it's
Powerful.
It's what I have at this point.
That brings us to the end of this podcast. I wish everybody could see the program here that I'm looking at from Lucas's funeral. Lucas Terrell Kitchen, July 23rd, 1998 through January 12th, 2020. This is a picture, it looks like a teenager there.
High school graduation.
High school graduation.
With him and Grandpa.
And this is Grandpa Ken. And I just love this picture together, and there's another picture in there with the two of them. Grandpa Ken, his older brother Ken, and Ken. And, I hope everybody could see this funeral service. There's like 12 things on this. I love the way you had so many people participate in this funeral, that you two were participants. You can just tell this is a man from a wonderful family. But him being gone creates this void, and I'm glad you're honest about that and how difficult it is, because on a pragmatic perspective, I recognize that can help people stay in this tunnel longer and stay in their body, just recognizing the pain it brings into other people's lives if I choose to leave this life. And that's okay. But it's really the things you're talking about, getting help, asking friends, being open with where you are and the role of Christ that you pointed out, Jill, that always loved you and always be with you. And I just joined voices with these two good women to please stay. Please stay. Stay for another day, stay in your body, get help. I think your older self will be glad you stayed. And thank you, our listeners. If you want to hear more of the podcast on this subject, suicide, you can go to Listen, Learn, and Love. And there's a menu bar at the top. That's listenlearnandlove.org. And there's a menu bar at the top that says podcasts, because there's like 300 podcasts now. And that has them in categories, so that if you wanted to find all the podcasts in this category, there's a bunch of them there. We'll add this one to that category. Thank you, our listeners, for joining us.